Welcome to Creative Imperfections. I'm Kelly, and I am so glad you're here. Think of this podcast as your safe place to be your beautifully messy self. Let's dive in. There's a thought that used to stop me more than I realized, and it didn't really sound dramatic at the time. It felt practical, responsible, maybe. It felt like awareness. What are they going to think? I replayed that in my head over every single thing I did. What are they going to think? And not always in the loud and obvious ways. Sometimes it was very subtle, just enough to make me hesitate for a second, to rethink something I was about to say, to second guess something I was about to do, to adjust even just slightly, so I wouldn't stand out too much or get it wrong or be misunderstood. And the tricky part about that is that it feels valid. Of course, people are going to have opinions. Of course, we're being perceived. Of course, what we do lands somewhere outside of us, so it feels normal to consider it. It feels like it's part of being a thoughtful, aware, professional human. But there's a line between being aware of others and being governed by them. And honestly, I didn't realize how much of my energy was being spent on imagined reactions. Not real conversations, not actual feedback, just assumptions or predictions. Stories I was telling myself about what other people might be thinking about me. And those stories were shaping my behavior. They shaped what I said and what I didn't say. They shaped where I showed up and where I held back. And at some point, I started noticing something that felt both uncomfortable and incredibly freeing at the same time. Most people are not thinking about me nearly as much as I thought they were. Not because they don't care, but because they're thinking about themselves, their own decisions, their own insecurities, their own conversations, their own version of what are people thinking about me. Everyone is walking around inside their own experience, managing their own internal dialogue, replaying their own moments, questioning their own choices. And in the middle of all of that, the amount of time they spend analyzing someone else is actually pretty small. And when they do think about you, it's usually brief, a passing thought, a quick impression, something that moves through their mind and then gets replaced by whatever they're dealing with next. But we take those imagined thoughts and we turn them into something permanent. We build entire decisions around them. We shrink ourselves to fit inside of them. We edit ourselves before we've even expressed anything, and we wait for approval that was never actually being withheld. And the cost of that adds up. Because every time you adjust yourself based on what you think someone else might think, you move a little further away from yourself. Maybe not dramatically, maybe not in huge leaps and bounds, maybe not all at once, but just enough that over time it becomes hard to tell what's actually you and what's been filtered. And here's something that took me a long time to realize. Even if someone does have an opinion, it doesn't last nearly as long as you think it does. People move on, they forget, they shift focus, they get pulled into something else. But we hold on to those imagined reactions like they're permanent records. We replay them, anticipate them, we let them shape things that haven't even happened yet. And at some point, it becomes less about other people and more about our relationship with our own expression. Because when you really start to see this clearly, something loosens, something shifts. You realize you've been living inside a spotlight that isn't even there. You've been assuming you have an audience that is mostly just passing through. And that doesn't mean people don't notice you. It just means they don't stay there. They don't sit and analyze every word you said. They don't carry your moment the way you carry it. They don't replay things the way you replay them. They're moving on, and you can too. There's a kind of freedom that comes from understanding this, and not in a dismissive way, not in a nothing matters way, but in a very grounded way. You start making decisions based on alignment instead of approval. You say the thing because it's true for you, not because it will land perfectly for everyone. You show up as yourself without trying to pre-adjust every possible interpretation. You stop trying to manage perception and start focusing on presence. And that doesn't mean you become careless or disconnected or unaware of others. It just means you're no longer outsourcing your sense of self to those imagined reactions. You're no longer waiting for silent permission. Because most of the time, the thing that's holding you back isn't someone else's opinion. It's your prediction of their opinion. And when you can finally see that clearly, you get a choice. Not to stop caring entirely, but to care about the right things, to care about how you show up, to care about what feels honest, about the way you move through your own life, and to let the rest just move through, because it will. People will think things, and then they'll think something else, and then something else after that. And in the middle of all of it, your life is still yours to live. Your voice is still yours to use. Your choices are still yours to make. And the less time you spend managing a narrative that isn't actually happening, the more space you have to just be in your own. And that's when things can start to feel lighter. Not perfect, not fearless, just less restricted, less filtered, less held back by something that was never as solid as it felt. You were never being watched as closely as you thought. And once you really let that sink in, you don't have to hold yourself so tightly anymore. You can just move. And that's where the magic lives. Thank you for listening to Creative Imperfections. Always remember, there's magic in the mess. If you enjoyed this episode, share it, subscribe, and keep showing up for your beautifully imperfect journey. Until next time.